Good afternoon and welcome. My name is David Feist and I will be facilitating today's webinar. Our presenter is Matt Howard, VP of Water Stewardship for the Water Council. Thank you for joining ANAB for our complimentary webinar on comprehensive water stewardship training. Please note, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available for future viewing. A few logistics before we get started. Due to the high attendance, everyone will remain muted for the duration of this webinar. Please enter your questions in the question and answer box that you'll find on your screen. We've planned some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions asked. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our presenter today. Matt Howard is the Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council. He oversees their stewardship initiatives, including WAVE, Water Stewardship Verified, Water Stewardship Advisory Services, and Comprehensive Professional Water Stewardship Training. He founded the Alliance for Water Stewardship System globally with specific oversight of North America. He is well regarded within the community. You can see his credentials in front of you. Please join me in welcoming Matt Howard from the Water Council. Matt.
Thanks, David. And thanks to all of you for joining this webinar this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are joining us from. Again, as David mentioned, my name is Matt Howard. I'm Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Water Council, maybe just some brief background on us before I dive into the training. The Water Council is a nonprofit. We're headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the US, but we work globally with companies, with utilities and others on water quality and quantity challenges. And we really do that through a variety of ways, one of which is through our network, our ecosystem of water companies, water nonprofits, water utilities, et cetera. In fact, we have about 150 members right now globally that support the mission of the Water Council. We've divided our work really between two key platforms. Our innovation and technology platform is handled by a colleague of mine, Karen Frost, who's our VP for Economic Development and Innovation. Karen helps oversee that platform of programs, which include our Technology Post-Accelerator program, our Tech Challenge program, as well as our Pilot Deployment program. And each of those programs, again, is really focusing on water technology and water solutions that help address water quantity and quality challenges. So a very robust technology and innovation solutions approach to improving water outcomes anywhere on the globe. Of course, the second platform, stewardship, is the one that I oversee. As David mentioned, we have really three main approaches to our water stewardship work. The first is our suite of verification programs under the WAVE brand. In fact, we launched a new WAVE program back in March. And really what we do through these two WAVE programs, WAVE Assess and WAVE Action, is really help companies develop a better understanding of how they use and impact water resources, what that means to them in terms of overall risk, and then ultimately where they need to be heading in terms of setting targets or goals for their organization in order to develop an overarching water strategy. Our second approach of programs underneath our stewardship work is focused around advisory services. And so we do work both in terms one-on-one work with companies, and we've worked for a wide range of companies as diverse as Apple and Google, to Sanofi and Abbott Labs and many different types of companies in between, and really working with those companies, again, more on strategic water stewardship issues. What does water mean to them in terms of business value, in terms of brand, and then really help them understand that and improve their impact and their outcomes as it relates to how they use water. We also, and this relates, of course, to this webinar today, run a training program. We're very happy with this partnership that we've just developed with ANAB. I have to give a big shout out here right at the beginning to David and his team who really worked with us to put together our comprehensive water stewardship training, which we're going to review at a very high level this afternoon. But again, thanks to David and ANAB for this partnership. While we have this training available 24/7 living on ANAB's website, the Water Council also does more comprehensive one-on-one training programs that are tailored toward individual organizations. All right, with all that being said, as you can see here, we have decades of combined experience at the Water Council to really bring to the table that led us to the development of this training program that we're going to run through with you today. As David mentioned, the Water Council was one of the founders of the Alliance for Water Stewardship. There were a handful of different companies that helped develop the Alliance for Water Stewardship, helped set the system up. And in fact, we spent about 6 years providing oversight for the AWS standard and its system here in North America. And within that role, we spent a significant amount of time helping to shape and develop both their in-person and their online water stewardship training, as well as their professional credentialing program. So we bring a lot of that experience. Now, granted, that was a while ago. We bring a lot of that experience to the table, but more recently for the Water Council, around the 2020, 2021 timeframe, we developed our own comprehensive water stewardship training that really sought and seeks to connect what we know in terms of site level or facility level water stewardship with enterprise or corporate level water stewardship. I'll talk a bit more about what that means in practice in a minute, because that is the training that David and his team in ANAB worked with the Water Council on to really shape this comprehensive water stewardship training here today that we're going to discuss. Next slide, please. So that decade of combined experience has helped us develop a better refinement and understanding of who should be taking this type of training. And so this is really targeted towards individuals within organizations that are really looking to build out a water program within that organization, or if a program already exists, to refine it, to update it, to potentially even develop a whole new strategy around water. So this training is really geared towards professionals within businesses, again, that are using and impacting water resources in some way, shape, or form. Similarly, if you're an individual and you're involved with ISO standards, whether it's 14,001, 14,046, for example, this training should resonate with you, because a lot of the concepts and the principles are built on a plan, do, check, act approach to continuous improvement. And so that's a really important concept when it comes to water stewardship, is that it's never a completed process. It really is something that needs to be updated and revised on an annual or at least every 2-year basis. And so those individuals that are familiar with ISO standards, again, I think would really benefit from this training. Decision makers in organizations, again, that are going to be setting water policies or approving water policies could certainly benefit from this. And as I mentioned, really kind of down to line level staff that are responsible for developing water programs inside companies are really going to benefit from this. And in terms of the company profile, I mean, it really just boils down to whether or not water is used in some way, shape, or form in your process or lives somewhere within your supply chain or value chain. And so we think whether you're in food and beverage, petrochem, the automotive sector, even retail, there's something in this training that we think could really resonate with you. And again, provide you with some skills and experience that you can bring back to your organization to develop your water program. Next slide, please. So in terms of the comprehensive water stewardship training itself, it's a module that has some check-in points, some self-assessment points built into it. Should take you between 1.5 hours to 2 hours time in terms of running through that actual training. And over the course of those several hours of training, you're going to run through these objectives here. We really spend a lot of time focusing on understanding the basics of water stewardship. For those of you that are new to water stewardship, maybe you've been doing carbon or energy or waste reduction or some other sustainability issue, water stewardship really has its own lexicon. We have our own lingo that we like to use. And so it's really important to run through some of the basics of water stewardship. Importantly, for companies just starting out, and maybe those with less resources than they'd like to have to address water issues, there are a lot of great free tools that are available. So we also spend quality time in the training running through some of the tools that are out there, internet-based tools that you can use to really help get you moving on your way in terms of water stewardship. I kind of hinted at this at the beginning, and again, we're going to spend a little bit more time on this in a minute. There are really two aspects to water stewardship when we're talking about an organization. There's the corporate or the enterprise perspective. In other words, that level where you're setting policies and goals across many sites or even within your supply chain in terms of procurement and other types of policies. So we kind of wrap that around some important steps in this training underneath the rubric of corporate water stewardship. We also then focus on operational water stewardship, which is really the site level. So we take an extensive amount of time through the training to really connect what happens in the boardroom with how water stewardship is really impacted and lived out on the shop room floor. And so that's really important, again, both in terms of understanding how water is used and impacted across the enterprise, but also in terms of setting targets, policies, and goals, how that is lived out through the organization, again, from the corporate level all the way down to the different facilities and sites, and even sourcing regions when it comes to water stewardship. And then, of course, last but not least, we want to tie all of these things together and really demonstrate in a practical way what good, effective water stewardship looks like in practice. Next slide, please. In terms of the more specific topic areas and the training agenda itself, you can see here that we really do cover what we like to call the world of water stewardship. So we really start out kind of with a building block approach. You know, why water? Why is water important to your business? What's water risk? How does that play out across the areas and the regions in which you operate and or source? And then we begin building the case for water stewardship and why we need water stewardship. We get into what we call Water Stewardship 101 next, kind of going back to what I said about unique lexicon and lingo that's associated with water stewardship and practice and the different principles. We spend some time on some basic definitions, kind of some table setting issues, if you will, to really provide those building blocks to better understand these concepts and how you're going to end up applying them in practice back within your organization. We focus on a little bit more specifically then on water and business. Again, just in terms of where water sits in the agenda, so to speak, right now for businesses globally, energy, carbon, GHG emissions, reduction, those things continue to maintain a high priority spot for companies. Water is starting to creep up on the priority list and in the order of issues that are addressed from a sustainability perspective. One of the primary reasons for that really is the climate-related impacts that are happening right now to our water resources. And so we spent a good amount of time unpacking what the business value is and the business case is for doing water stewardship, even getting into such concepts as the total cost of water. Presumably, if you're going to go back to your organization and you're going to begin developing a water stewardship program or implement an initiative, you're going to need to get an internal approval from a CFO, from some other part of leadership, and that business case is going to need to be included within that conversation. So we cover that in the water and business section. And then, as I mentioned, underneath the training objectives, we really dive into this idea of what does water stewardship look like from the corporate or the boardroom perspective? Kind of what are we seeing out there right now in terms of the landscape of best practices? And in a similar fashion, at the facility, at the site level, at a factory, at a farm, at a commercial office building, what does good water stewardship look like from that level? So we really spend time connecting the macro to the micro in terms of water stewardship. So that's the training agenda. Very comprehensive. Again, we're going to cover a lot of ground in this training in a probably about a 2-hour time period. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a little bit this idea of the need for water stewardship. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple things, especially for those of you that are joining us today that you're still maybe undecided in terms of how important water is for you from an organizational standpoint, or maybe you're working with a partner organization and they're in the process of prioritizing water vis-a-vis other issues. I think just a quick snapshot of what's happening right now globally around water crises should really be a motivational factor for businesses of all shapes and sizes in all regions to really begin understanding and applying these principles of water stewardship. I mean, we're seeing right now just over 40% of the world population living in water basins that are under stress. We see some global NGOs and other organizations working together to develop collective action projects that address stress in those highest stressed river basins. So that's way too many people right now living in those areas of high stress. We see 4 billion people experiencing severe water scarcity at least 1 month each year, and over 2 billion people right now living without access to adequate sanitation. So from a people perspective, we have some very serious water-related issues that we need to address, and business can really play its part in terms of how they operate to help alleviate or even contribute positively to addressing some of these negative outcomes right now globally. A very distressing figure is 80% of the world's wastewater right now is returned to the environment untreated. And then last but not least, we're seeing some significant impacts to freshwater species and a significant decline in the species of freshwater species, decline since 1970. I think another one I'm just going to throw in here, and this is specific to the United States, but I'm sure this is we've seen this situation play out in other countries globally. In the U.S. alone in 2024, we had the most $1 billion extreme weather events in U.S. history. In other words, an extreme weather event that caused more than $1 billion in damages and insurance claims. And most of those extreme weather events are disproportionately impacting or having an impact on water resources. So think flooding, extreme rain events, think extreme drought, and things of that nature. And again, businesses are caught and impacted by those extreme weather events. We've seen supply chain disruptions, factory shutdowns, temporary shutdowns because of water issues and flooding. So again, these global water crises aren't just happening in other countries. Chances are, no matter where you're calling from today, or you're sitting on this webinar today or watching it in the future, you're feeling some level of water stress. And of course, businesses aren't immune to that. Next slide, please. So more specifically, this data here comes from CDP. Some of you may know CDP. For those of you that don't, they are an international organization that has a reporting framework on water, as well as one on climate. And it's a voluntary reporting framework, but they collect a lot of great data. And so they've kind of gleaned some of this data from some of their most recent reports. Something like 4,000 companies last year reported to CDP globally on their water security issues. So as a disclosure where they talked about all the different water-related issues as a business that they face. So just to summarize some of the high points over the years that CDP has collected, this first bulleted point is really important. The cost of addressing water risks is 5 times greater the longer you wait. So as soon as you learn about that water related risk, address it immediately. The longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to get to address that issue. We're also seeing, though, at the same time, a lot of investment being poured into the water sector. And in fact, kind of a rip from the headlines moment, as we saw here in the United States, the cratering stock market, actually stocks in the water sector remained steady or even increased in value during that crisis because it was a safe place to park money. So there's a big investment opportunity just looking at the water sector in general, whether that's utilities, it's technologies, it's other things related to water. So we know water is important, and we know water crises can be expensive to companies. And we're seeing, roughly, according to CEP, about 2/3 of companies are reducing or maintaining their water withdrawals. That's good. It could be better. But only 4% of those companies are doing something about water pollution or water quality targets. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of action right now from companies. And so we've really identified within our profession, the water stewardship profession, something that we call the execution gap. There's a general realization that water is important. There's some pain being felt because of water crises, yet not nearly enough companies are beginning to do something about it. Hence the development of this comprehensive water stewardship training to really help broaden and expand the knowledge base and the risk radar around water issues for companies. Next slide, please. And so we take a comprehensive approach in this training. It's not just focused on one specific aspect of risk, say water scarcity or drought. That's the one that tends to get the most interest, the most media awareness, and just most general public awareness. Obviously, it's an acute, super important issue when it comes to scarcity and drought. But there are other physical risks and other water risks that are important to businesses. So we cover the comprehensive scope of risks. So from a physical risk standpoint, both water quality and water quantity, looking at things like water availability, water access, aging infrastructure in terms of delivering water, things like deteriorating ecosystems, and of course we get into drought and scarcity issues, but we cover the whole range of physical risk. We also look at a really important risk category called reputational risk. And that's really about your stakeholders and how do they perceive or potentially even misperceive your use and impact of water resources. And so we get into things like media awareness, stakeholder misperceptions, things of that nature. And so from a reputational standpoint, that can have an impact on a business's social license to operate or grow. And so that's a really important risk issue. So we focus on reputational risk as well. And last but not least, we look at regulatory risk. Certainly in North America and Europe, there's a lot of proposed new regulations around reporting, as well as compliance with water quality and quantity issues. And so the regulatory structure can really drive risk, especially when the regulatory structure is uncertain. So from a very high level, from a business standpoint, we like to say we'll expand your water risk radar. We'll get you beyond just focusing on water scarcity, water quantity related issues, and we'll introduce a whole range of issues, including quality, reputational, and regulatory risk. Next slide, please. So just to kind of conclude here with this particular slide, this is really driving home the point of the intersection of enterprise or corporate water stewardship and operational water stewardship. This is really the defining feature of this comprehensive water stewardship training. If you look globally right now, and of course we haven't scanned every single available online water related training that's out there, but in terms of the major trainings that are out there, this is the only one that we're aware of that really effectively connects these two concepts, the corporate and the site level. And that's really important because as you can see on the left-hand side, kind of looking at the enterprise or the corporate water stewardship loop, we get into some really important issues for companies to help them develop a water strategy, starting with materiality and use assessment. How important is water for that organization vis-a-vis other sustainability issues? What does that mean for them in terms of risk? What's the risk profile for the organization? And again, doesn't matter if you're a food and beverage company, if you're a petrochem company, if you're in the automotive sector or the electronics sector, we follow a process-based approach to help companies understand use and risk. That leads, of course, to risk prioritization and then ultimately into developing strategy or policy that hopefully includes targets and goals. And this is important because those targets and goals are lived out through the operation of the company, of the enterprise, right? Either at the site level or through sourcing or supply chain. And so that's really where the connection then comes in at the operational or at the site level. So now kind of moving over to the right-hand side, we'll see a similar sort of process take place at the facility, at the farm, at the commercial office building level, where we do some assessment and understanding at the site about how water is being used within the four walls of the facility, but also looking outside the four walls of the facility and into the fence line to gain a better understanding of the world of risk that could impact that particular site. We also talk about the importance of engaging stakeholders. Stakeholders provide really important intelligence on what's happening with regards to risk, particularly that reputational piece. So how are your customers? How are your partners? How are your regulators viewing you and your company in terms of your water operations? But they also can provide key input and insight into new regulations that are being developed or contemplated. So stakeholder engagement is really important. That leads to then a better understanding of not only the site's risks, but how they share risk and share challenges and opportunities with other businesses, with the community, within those watersheds where they operate. And then ultimately develop some actions that address and mitigate those risks that are happening at the site level. And so you can kind of see how these processes might feed into each other. You live out the ambition and the strategy from corporate through the enterprise at the individual site levels. But at the same time, at the site level, as you go through and develop a more refined understanding of risk at a particular facility, that's going to inform the overarching strategy, right? That's going to provide more information back to the company so it can continue to refine or validate the targets that it's set. And at the end of the day, whether we're talking at the corporate or the enterprise level or at the site level, doing external disclosure and reporting is really important. One of the things that we like to talk about when it comes to training or working on advisory engagements with our clients, it's important to tell your story when it comes to water stewardship. It has to be credible and it has to be transparent. So we provide some tactics and some strategies in terms of external reporting and disclosure. Just as a bit of a side note, for those of you that are engaged in the disclosure sort of business, whether that's ESG, sustainability, or regulatory disclosures, you know there's a lot of different frameworks out there that touch on water. And so we get into a little bit of that within this training. This training isn't really focused so much on those external reporting disclosures as it is really focused on ensuring that you find the right disclosure to tell your story, to tell it credibly, and to make sure that it's transparent. So again, this slide here, for me, really encapsulates the heart of the training and living out good water stewardship in your operations. It can't be siloed approaches from the corporate level and from the individual site level. There really needs to be a strong connection between the two and exchange of information, obviously, between the two as that water stewardship ambition grows, is revised, is updated over the course of several years. So that is a really quick overview of our training objectives, of our agenda, of what's happening globally right now with regards to water crises and water issues. But ultimately, what you will be able to do to address some of those challenges you face in terms of water issues by going through this training. So again, I'd like to thank David and his team at ANAB for working with us to put together this comprehensive water stewardship training. If you're interested in anything that I mentioned here about the Water Council, feel free to go to our website, fully updated, has all the information I covered at thewatercouncil.com. If you're interested in our verification programs, you can go directly to waveverified.com to learn more about that. You can see my contact information here. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about the training, obviously you can reach out to David and the ANAB team, and you can also feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. And with that, I think I will turn it back over to David or our hosts to see if there have been any questions that came in, and maybe there's a few more slides, David, that you'd like to run through
Yeah.
as well.
Thank you, Matt. What a great presentation. Yes, we have had more than a few questions that have come in. We're going to get to those in a minute. We'll discuss a couple resources. As Matt mentioned, this training on water stewardship is available on the ANAB website. If you go to training and you look under self-paced training, you will find that, and you can register for that immediately. We also have quite a bit of other information. ANAB has a lot of different media. We've got the webcasts, which are pre-recorded videos, the webinars, which this is one of. These are live informational sessions that we offer several times monthly. These are recorded. They will be available on our site permanently. We have our blog page where we discuss a variety of activities. And we also offer online and in-person and self-paced training in a lot of areas, including internal auditing, standard requirements, measurement confidence, risk analysis. So let's get to the questions. One of the first questions which came in, Matt, is, does the Water Council also work with farmers? Is that part of your milieu?
Yeah, good question. So we have in the past. In fact, we set up a collective action project in Canada and Manitoba, really addressing on-farm water quality and quantity issues a couple of years ago. And we'll still be involved on a sort of an on-demand, as needed basis. But to be honest, the programs that I've mentioned, the WAVE programs, really focus more on in the industrial space. But again, that's not to say that we wouldn't respond to a specific on-farm or agricultural need or demand, but that's kind of naturally where we've kind of fallen, is in that space around industrial water use.
Okay, thank you. That's great. There is a follow-on question to that, asking exactly what is WAVE?
Yeah, so WAVE is a independent verification program that we developed at the Water Council. There are it's two separate programs. One is a 5-step approach to help companies understand water use, impact, and risk across their enterprise. And it's independent verification is a part of that. SCS Global Services provides that independent verification piece. So there's a verification claim and a logo that goes along with that. And then the second, or sort of partner program to that, is called WAVE Action. That's a 4-step target or goal setting program, as well as collective action prioritization program. So it helps companies set targets and goals that are directly responsive to risk, and also identify opportunities for collective action within their supply chain or value chain. Again, that's also a verification program, and SCS Global Services provides the verification for that.
Perfect. Thank you. One of the next questions that we've got is, what level of knowledge or expertise does somebody need to take the course that you've mentioned?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I think the way that we've designed this is to really provide an entry point for individuals into water stewardship. It can seem quite complex when you're getting into water stewardship for the first time. Like I said, there's a lot of specific language or lingo in there, a lot of unique terminology and concepts. So we do spend some time at the beginning of the module, at the beginning of the training, kind of running through some of those basic concepts. So by no means do you have to be a water, a technical expert. It really, we should give you enough of a foundation, even if water is relatively new to you, in terms as an industrial concept. You should be just fine going through the training.
Okay, thank you. Um, Another question in that vein, how does this course compare to other similar courses that I see out there that may be available and that you may know about?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning. I'm not going to sit here and say I've done a comprehensive scanner review of clearly of all the water stewardship courses that are out there, but of the major courses that I'm aware of, again, what makes this one unique is the connection between corporate or enterprise water stewardship and site level water stewardship. And so I think in that regard, it is fairly unique globally that we spend an equal amount of time talking about how water stewardship looks and feels a little bit different from each of those vantage points, but also how you connect those two and ensure that you have a coherent strategy throughout your enterprise, through your company, from the boardroom to the shop floor.
Matt, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned building out a water program. Will I be able to build out a water program at my company after I take this course?
Yeah, I think you will certainly be prepared to bring back, the concept of water stewardship, to begin applying it within your organization. Um, and you should have the confidence to get started in building out a program. You may need some additional skills, some additional knowledge as you start getting a little bit deeper into developing that program. And certainly there are a lot of resources, both from the Water Council, other NGOs and consultancies that are out there that can help you. But the intention here is that you've got enough information here to go back to your organization and, yeah, begin developing something from the ground up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt. Those are the questions that we have. Is there any additional information you would like to impart?
I think, David, again, just that I'm available. You can find my contact information at thewatercouncil.com. If you've got any more specific questions on the training or just anything about the world of water stewardship in a corporate setting, feel free to contact me and have a conversation about that. But again, I want to thank you, ANAB, and encourage all the participants here to obviously check out the water stewardship training, but look at all the training that's on ANAB's website, as it really is quite comprehensive.
Okay. There is one final question that came in. Is there any discount code for the water stewardship training?
No, there are discounts for water stewardship, or I'm sorry, for water council members. Um, if you're looking for a discount, I guess I would need more information as to why are we talking like student or nonprofit. But as of right now, we think it's really reasonably priced for the training.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. That's greatly appreciated. If you'd like any additional information about training that's offered by ANAB, you can contact us at training@anab.org. If you have questions about accreditation or services related to that, you can contact ANAB at anab.org. And if you're ready for a quote or you have some information about pricing, you can contact Roger Muse, and he can be reached at rmuse@anab.org. I want to thank everyone for attending today. Matt, this has been a great presentation. This
Thank you.
concludes our webinar today. Thank you.